Hello. So my name is Monica Dema. I'm the owner of MDinc, a content creation agency, and I have the fortunate task of introducing these three lovely humans to talk about your assertiveness skills and the power of no. So a little bit about our team. To my immediate left is Robin Berg. She's founder and president of Technoforce LLC and president-elect of New Jersey State Women's Chamber of Commerce. Next to her is Stephanie Staub, New Jersey Community and College Consortium for Workforce and Economic Development. And lastly is Sarah Switlik, COO of Switlik Parachute Company. And they'll go into a little bit about their position and what they do and what brought them here. Just 30 seconds or less, Robin, if you want to start.
It's on now, right? Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Robin Berg Tabakin. That's okay. It's Robin Tabakin. I am president owner of Technoforce. We do workforce and economic development, particularly in the offshore wind and clean energy area right now. And I am president-elect of the New Jersey State Women's Chamber of Commerce. We cover all of New Jersey, and we advocate for women business owners and help with business development.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Staub. I'm the Director of Workforce Strategy with the New Jersey Community College Consortium for Workforce and Economic Development, which is a mouthful. And my title used to be Director of Infrastructure and Energy Sectors Workforce Partnership. So I'm glad that they gave me a three-letter or three-word title. They changed it. Prior to that, I spent 30 years working in the construction industry, which is where my assertiveness skills were honed, working for two different building trades unions, but in marketing. So I think that this panel especially, I'm looking forward to imparting some knowledge to all of you.
As she said, I'm Sarah Switlik. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Switlik Survival Products. Corporately, we are Switlik Parachute Company. We're a 104-year-old manufacturer, still one of the Trenton makes, the world takes corporations. The fourth generation, currently taking over from my dad, running the day-to-day. And yes, again, when this topic spoke to me because of a couple of things I've had uphill, headed in for position of authority earlier in life than most people have, responsible for a big and growing company, and then working in a lot of government and business to business, but rescue spaces where I'm not, they're a little bit more male dominated, a little bit more older. So it was time to find my voice, and I'd love to share some experiences with everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you, ladies. So the format of this is conversational, right? We're going to ask some questions, have some conversation. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for 15 minutes of Q&A. So if you don't mind just holding on to your questions until that point, that'd be great. So Robin, we'll start with you. How can we use our assertiveness skills to further our careers or our job opportunities?
So assertiveness is no, but it's also yes. And yes, you do have to really have the ability to say no to things that aren't going to help further your career or your place in your spot in the workplace. But I think you also have to forge your own path, and don't wait for things to come to you. You need to find opportunities and then go after them. And you have to be assertive about it, because there are a lot of people looking maybe to do the same thing that you're doing. In my case, it was getting on to a number of different councils and running for president. It happened over decades. It didn't just happen. But those are the things that have helped propel my career, because of the network I've been able to build, and the opportunities that have come to me because of that and visibility on these particular councils. But in general, I think that you have to be able to know that you have to do some self-talk and build your confidence within yourself know that you can do the job better than anyone else, and you know that because you know yourself, and you also build support with other people around you, so that when when people say no to you, you can go back to them with the support that you've built around you. And you find people who can, sponsor you in the sense that they look for opportunities and say, hey, something's coming up, maybe you ought to take a look at it. And also, as far as your supporters go, don't necessarily, you can deal with people who don't necessarily have an interest in the same field that you have, but have an interest with you in you as a person, because you want to make sure that, that they're there to truly help you and not compete with you.
So it sounds like assertiveness is a team sport, not necessarily an individual sport.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's great. I'm going to touch on that for just 1 second too, because it took me 5 years in my career to learn the word no. I never knew I could say that, right? I was working 80 some odd hours, and one of my managers said, you can say no to this project because I don't know where you'll find the time. And I'm like, what do you mean I can say no? And it blew my mind because I had always said yes. And I think once you start saying no after saying yes, people understand you really mean it. And it's not a matter of poo-pooing on anybody or any project. It's more like you only have so much time to do a good job, and it's okay to say no and assert yourself and your personal boundaries in that way.
And you don't want to be taken advantage of.
Yes.
That's a big thing.
Yes.
If I could add to that,
Please.
I would say you don't always have to say no, right? Like sometimes you want to do that project, but you can't because you have limited time and resources to do it. So if you say no, then it's done, but you really want to do it, right? So maybe the no is, I'd like to do this, but I need to reprioritize other work because I can't do it all, right? So sometimes you have to think of not just no, but your answer needs to be crafted to yield the outcome that you want. If you want no, don't be afraid to say no. My husband's in the back of the room. He'll tell you, I say no all the time, and I have no problem just saying no. But it is hard in a work setting. So that's why I'm always looking to look at the end result that you want and figure out the best way to get there. And if you're not comfortable saying no, there are other words you can use that yield the same result.
I have the perfect thing, and you can write this down where, Jim, I would love to be able to do this project. It excites me. What can we remove from my to-do list to make room for this? So it's more of a collaborative, how do we get to a yes? It's not a no,
Exactly.
right? It's more of let's reprioritize what else I'm doing so that we can do this project that is a yes, right?
Exactly.
There's lots to build on. The example I had was, it's talking about bandwidth. In particular, we were chatting just before that while I'm taking over right now and recognizing that in my role, I need to be out more doing things both for the company, but also the day-to-day tasks. But I have a 1 and a 4-year-old at home and, limited time and energy, and touching upon how can I make sure that I'm adding value to what I'm doing, and that power to recognize when you're hitting your limit is something that I've experienced a lot in the last 2 years of just saying, I want to say yes to everything to get involved, but it's all about prioritizing and recognizing when you feel like you're at your bandwidth and you're risking not doing something well or to the best of your ability because you're overextended. That can do you a bigger disservice than pausing or saying, I'd love to get more information about your organization, but recognizing you have a lot of other things going on.
That's incredibly fair, and it's respectful of their time as well. You're not just saying yes and then potentially failing in that project. So Stephanie, I have a question for you, if you don't mind. What are some strategies you use to develop or enhance your assertiveness?
Okay. So I will first say that I don't actually have to work on my assertiveness because it comes extremely naturally for me. To the point, seriously, that I need to tone it down. Like, so chatting before the session, right? Like, we're kind of in different stages of our career. Sarah has younger children. I'm an empty nester. So trying to be intentional with assertiveness, right? So assertiveness can be looked at as aggressive. So because I'm very assertive, I blend into the aggressive side. So I try to tame it, but I try to frame positive aggressiveness. So the first thing I would say is get yourself a hype guy. Because if you don't have a friend or a partner or a colleague who is going to tell you all of the great things that you don't see in yourself, because I guarantee you don't see it in yourself, you need that person to build your self-confidence, right? So that hype person builds your self-confidence. You also need to try to frame everything using positive words. I get hung up on words, and I've learned to get hung up on words, not because they affect me, but I've noticed some words can affect other people. We've all also become more in tune to different mental health issues, right? We're all different people. I'm aggressive. I have colleagues in the room. I'm not going to point her out, but she's very non-aggressive and non-assertive. So for my colleague to speak up in a meeting and speak her opinion, I'm so proud of her to do that. And that's a progress for her, but that's not progress for me. So get yourself a hype guy or gal. Try to frame everything as positively as you can, but understand who's receiving the message and tone your assertiveness to mirror that person so that you're not maybe going a little too far and bleeding into the aggressive side, right? And I think that can also work whether it's colleagues or even at home with your children, as your children have friends. I mean, this is just life, right? So understanding who's receiving your message, this is the marketing person coming out, is really the very first and important thing for you to be effectively assertive. But there's other things I think will help you get there.
Just to build on that, I had two thoughts while you were chatting. The first is about the hype person, and recognizing that it's great if you can have somebody like that at the office. It's also great if you can have somebody that you don't have to pay. But at the same time, don't be afraid. I don't have, those things always. I have a professional coach who builds me up and has helped me over the years. And it's nice when you have somebody that if I start talking about my dad or, other things, she's like, no, I'm here for, I'm here for you, and just helps level set for me, particularly when I'm worried about, making a justification because of the kids or this, whatever. And she's like, not just about my gender, but my age. She said, no, Sarah, you're the chief operating officer of, a multi-million-dollar corporation. Think about what somebody else would do in your role and do that. You've earned that. The second thing that you were talking about is knowing your environment. And that was something I learned as well. I have a very sarcastic personality, and also a very light or a weak facial filter, meaning that I'm very expressive. And yeah, there's a sign on my desk that says my face is not responsible for what it does while you speak. But then once you are in a managerial role, a leadership role, recognize that whether you want it to or not, people are looking for you to be assertive and of authority. And so you can't always make jokes, or you have to understand that they could be taken differently. And it's like, don't they know me? And it's like, yeah, but you're in charge now. So they're going to hear that differently. And you just need to be aware of that. It's a weapon and a strength.
So I'm not sure if it was Andrew Huberman or Tim Ferriss that had this idea to get through rejection. And I'll come back to where this ties in. To get through rejection, go to Starbucks and McDonald's or wherever and ask for a 10% discount. And they're more than likely to say no, but sometimes they'll say yes. But what did that cost you, right? It was 5 seconds of your time, small exercise in accepting rejection, and then sometimes you get that win. Do the same thing with being assertive. If you're not currently assertive, or if you could be a little bit more assertive, yet on the good or aggressive side, and see where you can exert yourself, go a little bit out of your comfort zone, so that you're doing it when it doesn't matter, it's easier. But then when you do it when it does matter, it's easier there too. What do you think, Robin?
Well, I want to bring it to a different situation. I think sometimes when you are not starting off in your career, but you're mid-range or upper, we're all in a room full of, I would say, 95% women, if not more. But sometimes you're in a room with just men, or maybe there's one other woman there, and you're around a table and you're having discussion. It's a team meeting, and you want to you have your ideas, and perhaps they're not the same as everyone else's. There are times when they will not just reject you, but just kind of poo-poo you, really, yeah. And how do you get your voice heard? There's a situation that there's been a lot of studies on this stuff. There's a term called the double bind, which is a woman who is too assertive is deemed as arrogant and not nice and nasty, and if you are too soft, then you're deemed as not assertive. And a lot of that is in the corporate world. It does apply everywhere, but it's something that you have to be cognizant of, so you have to watch your tone. But on the other hand, if there's a whole room full of people, men, don't offer to take notes. And I've made that mistake before. Don't take a stereotypical woman's role. And if they ask you to take notes, okay, do it, but then afterwards you talk to them.
Say no.
Okay, you can say no. You can say no. But I would also talk to them and say, just because I'm the female, don't come to me.
Or ask them if their pen doesn't work. Do you need a pen that works? That's another thing that I've gotten really good at, because I'm really I do have a very rough personality. He'll tell you. I mean, if someone says something really just so bizarre that you don't even know what to say, just say to them, "Are you okay?" I've read that somewhere. I don't know where. Are you okay? If they make a joke that's inappropriate, are you okay? If they say something that borderlines, truly uncomfortableness, are you okay? Or just whatever. And that person will be taken aback and they'll get the message. That's how sometimes you get your message without saying the message. That's what women do really good. You don't have to say no, Robin. Next time I want you to say no. And
they know not to ask me to do that.
Nope. I worked for unions. They would never ask me to take notes because they know. The one union that I worked for, the head of the union actually said in a meeting, and this is, I'm going to say words, I hope no one's recording this, but he said, "I wish my business agents had balls as big as Stephanie." Because I'm not afraid to ask. But to your point, you have to do it to practice to be able to actually do it. And no, there are times I'm in meetings that I'm actually intimidated to speak up. Or I think what I'm going to say is stupid. And then somebody else says it. I'm like, I knew I should have said that. So you know what? I say it now. And if it sounds dumb, I don't care. Because it doesn't. You just think it does. Because you need a hype guy to tell you really are good at what you do. You know what you're doing. You've got good ideas.
Yeah, and if you want to get your idea across, you just make sure that you do it, and make sure that people listen to you, and you have your reasoning. And once they hear, why you are saying what you're saying, they usually, then actually you become a much more valuable member of the team.
So Sarah, how do you find your voice in a room that's so different?
Yeah, it took time. I lean into my strengths. So I have like I said, sarcasm or dry sense of humor, which I've found in the older male population, sometimes breaking the ice with a joke or just finding kind of a punchline in, just to let them know that I'm paying attention, kind of that, like you said, take a shot across the bow in a respectful way, but just let them know that you're listening, and then that sometimes just breaking the ice is the big thing, and then you can start to talk about other things. That's a trick that's that's worked for me in the past, or kind of waiting in the sidelines for the front half of the meeting so that I can then find the punch or the interjection in. I was given feedback in college when we did a group setting, a leadership training thing where everybody was being watched to see what their role was. They said that I was a silent leader, that I wasn't the most vocal person in the group, but I kept everybody on track, and kept things moving and was forceful. And I kind of took that away, that you don't always have to be the loudest person or the chattiest person in the room to control the room, to control the vibe, and just recognizing that there's a silence to assertiveness just as much as the overly talkative kind.
And when you're talking about controlling room, I have to say it's very important to learn how to run a meeting. You know, if you, especially being a woman, you have to know how to run a meeting. Whether you are in a group with all women or a mixed group, whatever it is, you have to know how to maybe cut somebody off in a tactful way so that you can move on to the next subject. You stick to your agenda and you don't run over. That's really important. And you have to be assertive about that, because people have value, they value their time. And if you're in a meeting that's, supposed to be an hour and it ends up being an hour and a half, we've all been there. But if you're the one who's in charge, it reflects really badly on you. So that's another good spot to think about assertiveness.
That's fantastic. So I know you talked about the double bind. Where else are there opposing, I want to say doctrines, opposing characteristics with women in the workplace? So if you're too nice or if you're too assertive, it's viewed differently. So how does that hold you back?
I think, you can be nice and maybe overextend yourself sometimes. I think that's something, if you're too nice, you can overextend yourself. But I just want to say this is like a little bit, because I was in a situation recently where I was on a group call and it was being run by a male who I have respect for, it was a technical conversation, and I'm less technical than a lot of people there. And he said, there are no dumb questions. So I asked a question that I did not think was dumb. And he said, I'm not even going to answer that. It was that kind of a situation. And I was really taken aback, but I want to tell you that there were no other questions on the call, because when somebody does something like that to you, then everybody else is going to be concerned that it's going to happen to them. So sometimes you can be assertive, but if the person who is assertive in a wrong way, it makes them look bad. So you have to be really careful about how you phrase things, and you have to also give people respect. So assertiveness, but with respect.
Can I it's not really that question, but something that Robin said. I think it's important to know, I personally don't think that assertiveness is tied specifically just to me and me advocating for myself. I will always tell you, advocate for yourself, whether you're a woman, you're a man, always advocate for yourself. But being assertive for me is also speaking up in the time. It's speaking up in the times that you need to speak up. And that may be for yourself, that may be for a colleague. Because if I was in a meeting like that, I have a hard time now more than ever, because it is even more socially acceptable to speak up, and it's expected. You all should be speaking up for the people who are not being treated correctly in your presence, whether that is personally or professionally. I've done it personally and I've done it professionally, and you can do it professionally, right? It's not going off. You don't have to tell somebody off. But if someone is doing something wrong to another person, we are obligated to say something. And that is being assertive. You're assertive in what's right. So don't think you just have to speak up for yourself. Someone else could have spoken, or a man
should have said something
in the meeting when they asked her to take notes, should have said, someone else could speak up.
you can say, I disagree with what you're saying. You know, if in other words, when that person did that to me, somebody else should have said, I disagree. I think you need to answer the question. So, you know, it was a lesson learned, I think, for everybody on the Zoom.
Thank you for sharing that lesson with us, because I think we've all been there where it wasn't just somebody being assertive, they were slamming the door shut. And then where's the dialogue, conversation, and growth? Where's the value in that meeting or just being present to it? Because if you're kind of shuddering, not professionally, but just like you're going inward and you can't feel comfortable asking a question, what's the point? What's the point? So in male-dominated STEM industries, how can women assert themselves in ways that are heard and it resonates and other people feel welcome to share?
Well, yes, we're in STEM. We're in both engineering and manufacturing lots. So we make safety and survival equipment. We make a lot of gear for the government. We make pretty much or the life vest that go on your seat on an airplane, anti-G suits for, you know, the Tom Cruise, the Top Gun kind of guys. And so what we do is very, very serious. And so trying to convey that is hard throughout the building. But your question was, what can women do in male-dominated industries? Well, one thing that I'm doing with intention inside of our company, at the very least, is surrounding myself with other women on my leadership team, you know, making hires that are the best for the role, but I think being a lot more open-minded to the fact that, you know, working women, working mothers, you know, we have one employee that when we brought her on during the interview process, she was telling me a little bit about herself, and she's like, well, I'm, you know, a mom of small kids. I'm doing this. I'm also getting my degree, you know, with honors. And I was like, honestly, I don't need to know anything else, because I know that your project management and your time management and all of that like have to be spot on. And so just surrounding yourself in where you can with other members of the team appropriately has helped us a lot.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So we're not quite close to the end yet, but I do have another question I'd like to ask all of you. If your 8-year-old self were on stage next to you now, what advice would you have for her to help instill that little seed of assertiveness, and maybe what would that change for you?
So growing up, I was the oldest of 3, and my father always said to me, you know, be a leader, don't follow, and set the example for your brother and sister. Constantly. I heard this all the time. And, you know, I took it to heart. It didn't take long until when I got into, I guess, high school and then college. I always ran the committees, or I ran whatever it was. I usually would start to run things, and by volunteering, by opening my mouth, by taking on responsibility. And that's it's been a consistent, looking back, it's been a consistent pattern in my life. And you learn leadership skills as you go. You know, some people, they say born or learned, whatever. I think you learn things as you go, by making mistakes, by correcting your mistakes, by reading about how other people have handled certain things, and by watching other people and learning to build, again, build a support system with wherever you are, whether it's, you know, whatever organization you're in, you should have a support system, just like you've been both building. So that's important.
We don't have enough time for me to tell you what I would tell my 8-year-old self, because I have a lot of things. But I will say that this is going to sound really weird, but I would tell myself to talk less and listen more. Because I just learned that a few years ago too, that you would be surprised how much you're really not hearing when you're still talking. And, you know, like when you're focusing on what you have to say. And when it comes to like tying that with assertiveness, is because something Robin said that I don't think you all may have heard. I was going to say it again, but if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you can't do it, it's okay. Let them know that you can't do it. But if you're accountable, like that is the one trait about me that I pride myself on. And it's also the thing that's that interview question is, what is that one trait about yourself that is really a negative? And I think it's my accountability, because I assume what you're accountable for, I assume it, and I have to stop that. So listening more gives me more information, and I feel like that helps prepare me for the receiver of the message. I understand them. And that's what was the breakdown before.
My dad used to say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth to talk, to listen twice as hard as you talk, right? But it is hard when you're also a quiet child, right? Where you're leading in your quietude and your followership. So it's an interesting balance to understand.
I also will give you one more word of advice. I tell my kids this all the time. If you don't ask the question, the answer is no. Straight up. If you don't answer,
It's true.
if you don't ask, the answer is no. And even when you know the answer is no, because my kids have told me the no, still ask it. I've booked non-refundable rooms and I get refunded every single time. Don't fall for it.
But this, and saying the same, well, that's right. But also, if you don't bid on a project or you don't put yourself out there, the answer is no. The worst that can happen is you don't get it, you get rejected. But if you don't ask, if you don't put yourself out there, then it's no always, and you'll never get ahead.
8-year-old self. So I'm the youngest of 3, actually, and the only one that came into the business. But I've been a people pleaser and running my family kind of my whole life. My parents always joke they say my older siblings got the lecture, but Sarah got the lesson. And I weaponized that just as much as I used it to my advantage. How do you get dad to do this? And I'm like, well, I asked, and that, but just that carrying that forward is that being a people pleaser, if you will, is both my greatest strength and my greatest weakness at work. And I get told, and I have other people say, like, don't mistake Sarah's personality. Don't make this mistake the fact that she's very approachable and personable as, that to be taken advantage of. And so finding that line of wanting to fix everything, wanting to help, wanting to please stuff, but then taking a step back and saying, no, you're in charge, and that's, you don't have to do that all the time. But I think there is power to being approachable and trying to please people where you can, not in a put down way, but there's no shame in maintaining. So the other thing I would say is maintain your personality, because your core traits that you have with you when you're 8 years old, they are who you are.
And you're just learning who you are at that age too, right? And respect to yourself and the people around you, whether it's your family or your friends. I'll answer the question that I just asked, if you don't mind. So I would tell 8-year-old Monica, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to speak out for myself and for the other people on the playground. I forget who mentioned it about, I think you, Stephanie, speaking out for people that are around and understand that when they're getting picked on or shut down, maybe they just need a voice, right? And they can borrow mine. So telling my little self that would be fantastic. But one thing I remember doing as a kid before presentations is putting my hands on my hips in front of the mirror, kind of like Spider-Man or Wonder Woman or one of those, and like breathing deeply and hyping myself up in my head, not out loud, because I didn't want my family thinking I'm strange. But I think that really worked. And then a couple of years ago on Grey's Anatomy, she said that's what she did before neurosurgery. And I was like, oh, I've been onto something this whole time, so that I could find my voice. I had to really connect with myself in a way that mattered, because I didn't have a hype person, right? You're 8, 9, 10 years old, whatever. And I just felt really good. So you can borrow that if you feel called for a time where you need to be assertive, or every day if you wanted to do that. But body language has so much to do with what we see and what other people see too, right? And I argue that conversation is the enemy of communication, because more conversation happens in our words, body language, how we show up, than it does with what comes out of our mouth sometimes. So yeah, that's what I would tell my little self. So now, being that we're all pretty in the trenches of our careers, where do you want to take your assertiveness skills? Have you plateaued, or are there other times where you see yourself speaking out more to reach that next level? And not speaking out in a bad way, but just maybe speaking up.
I'm using my good to impart on others. So my goal has always been for my daughter to be as assertive as I am. And she wasn't. When she was in high school, she was not someone who would speak up about anything. And she's in college now, and she has found her voice, and she speaks up. And I want others to too. I mean, I want to empower other women to feel in control of their life. And that starts with being assertive, because it's positive. Stop thinking of assertive. Assertive women are aggressive, and that's negative. It's been literally, men are afraid of me because I'm so assertive. Literally my whole life, right? It's funny. She's approachable, and people are like, don't take that as a sign of weakness, where I think I could come off so hard that people don't literally wow, you actually have a heart. You have feel. I had one of my contractors saw me cry at a viewing. He's like, wow, you actually have feelings? I'm like, yeah, I do. But
are you okay?
Yeah, are you okay? Really? Maybe you should go where he is. But that's me. I want all of you to be able to feel okay in your way of being assertive, because your assertive doesn't look like mine. And understand that too.
What if we swapped out the word assertive with enthusiastic?
Like that.
Right? I have enthusiastic skills, right? Because it shows passion, it shows gumption and confidence and all the things that we associate with positive attributes. So you're just really enthusiastic, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I can go for where I want to continue to take my assertiveness. As I mentioned before, I'm in the transition right now of taking over a 104-year-old company from my dad, but for the next generation. And we were just chatting last week about something I want to do for more coaching and leading and values in a much more cultural and vibe related for the company. And he said straight out, I don't always understand what you're trying to do, but I do recognize that you're leading in a different time than when I was, and I recognize that a lot more of that stuff that prior generations might have felt was hokey or not the best use of time and energy and resources matters. So I want to continue to be assertive, particularly in manufacturing, in those dominated areas that we can do leadership training, we can lean into management and skill set, and do values and values awards and all of that big corporation or more stuff in the factory and on the floor, and lead it in a different direction and intention, even though it's going to look different than my prior generations. And I have to stick to my guns, even when I have people who have been there for a long time. They're like, can't we just make stuff? And it's like, yes, but if we like each other, we'll make it better. And so go to the team building exercise and enjoy yourself.
So I do a lot of advocacy work. So I'll divide it into two areas. In my own work, I do workforce development, and what I advocate for in that is to help get the underserved population in the state educated so that they can gain skills for all the new jobs that are coming in the clean energy field. And so that means talking a lot. You know that. I talk about it incessantly. It's almost sad, but there are people who cannot, their voices are not heard. So in order to help large groups of people, I advocate on their behalf, and equally important, if not more, is I advocate for women in minority-owned businesses, and I've been doing that since early 1999, actually, when I first joined my first women's business group, and now it's with the Women's State, the New Jersey State Women's Chamber of Commerce. So I advocate on the state level because the state does not award enough contracts to women and minority-owned businesses, and I, along with the other leaders of different diverse state chambers, are out there literally testifying in Trenton and having meetings with candidates and really advocating so that more women and minority-owned businesses are taken into account when it comes time to awarding, and not just making awards to the same people that you've been doing that for, because you can't grow the state economy if you don't grow small business. And I'll tell you, advocacy requires assertiveness. It absolutely does.
Are we at the Q&A portion? All right, perfectly timed. Thank you, Robin. So I'll open it to the floor. There are 2 microphones here. Step on up and ask any question that you feel called to ask.
This is a session on assertiveness.
You can, or just speak loudly.
Yeah, I have a loud voice. I have a question for Stephanie, but I just had a couple of comments before that. So I realized that the 10 years of my career that have gone the best have been this 10 years. Coming to these conferences have really helped me find my voice. And I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of men who have said a lot of stupid things, and that has given me a lot of confidence. It might be a stupid question, but men ask stupid questions all the time. So now I'm just really feeling free to ask all the questions. The other comment is, with assertiveness versus aggressiveness, no one should be aggressive. If you're in a room and people are aggressive, 10 years ago I would have thought, well, I'm in the wrong room. Now I think the room is wrong, and I have to help fix the room. So, but my question to you, Stephanie, is how do you help a colleague in a meeting who you do feel isn't being assertive enough? How do you help her be more assertive in real time?
Okay, so in that meeting, so if it's happening in that meeting, I mean, I guess it really depends on the situation. So there may be things I could do in the meeting to help her, but we'll pause that for now. If I felt that there was a time in a meeting that my colleague needed help, or there was a time that she should have or could have been assertive to her benefit and she wasn't, I would definitely have a conversation with her afterwards and just kind of feel out why she didn't speak up. I mean, I know like the colleague that I referenced that, wouldn't speak up, she's just very timid, and she is speaking up now. In fact, there are times, and I don't take credit for that. I mean, maybe I have helped her, but I think going back to the always speaking professionally, speaking with authority, your business, right? Like you have your job, and if as long as you are putting forth yourself in that positive way of understanding and knowledge, then that will help her. So that would be the conversation after. In real time in the meeting, if it was a topic, if I had the ability to sway the conversation toward what point I thought she was trying to make to enable her to feel comfortable to then speak up, like I would try to guide it that way, but I would never in a meeting embarrass someone either by saying, would you like to say, or like maybe if I knew how they felt about something, we had a prior conversation, I could reflect on that and say, I think last week, Sally and I were just talking about this, and, we kind of do it that way. But I would definitely not walk away from the meeting and do nothing.
Thank you for your question. Yes. And if you wouldn't mind also saying your name too.
My question is just, in being assertive, has it ever backfired just a little bit on you? And what did you do? How did you recover from that?
I'll answer that if that's okay, Casey. So pricing is an interesting issue, whether it's contract negotiations or salary negotiations. So I was talking to a team, it was a technology company where they sold software and hardware for companies. And it was all men on the call, all man owned agency. Maybe there was 2 women I ever encountered. And I gave them the pricing, and the man said, "Oh, Monica, I love what you're going to do for us. I just can't get over the price." And I knew he was price conscious going into this. And I'm like, "I know, Paul, isn't it super affordable?" And I flipped that script in a fun, respectful way because, value is what you get, price is what you pay. But there is a way to bring levity and excitement to the conversation where you don't have to be timid and you don't have to be reserved, and you can still be authentically yourself as you're speaking up on behalf of yourself. Does that answer your question?
I think you have to take the temperature of the situation. So, all right. I was once on, not that long ago, on a team where we were planning a conference, and not this year, a few years ago. And we weren't getting cooperation from some of the people who should have been contributing. Mostly people who should have been sponsoring. And I was thinking to myself, well, how are we going to get these people to start doing what they're supposed to do? And do we need to, you have to be careful. You don't go above people's heads. And that's really what I learned in that conversation. I didn't do it, but I said something about maybe doing it. And the chair pulled me back and said, be careful. We can't do that. And, it was a lesson learned. I just think you have to, again, take the temperature and make sure you're not overstepping bounds. I know that overstepping is something we sometimes do naturally, especially for assertive people, but you have to do it with keeping in mind that you don't want to lose respect from other people.
We have a question in the back.
Hi, this has been a great panel. I'm Gianna. I am in an entry-level role, and I wanted to kind of ask anyone what kind of advice you give to someone who's in a more learning role right now in flexing their assertiveness muscles. Because I'm surrounded by people who are brilliant, but I also have I'm on the ground working in the weeds of some of the stuff that I'm working on. How do I kind of work on my assertiveness in this type of role?
Well, part of it, I think, is spinning off of what you said. One way that you can practice some of that is in smaller conversations or one-on-one, or ask in the large group. Ask the question. But don't over insert yourself. But you can find your voice by asking a question, just to literally say the words out loud so they know what your voice is. And then I think after the fact, find one person in the room that you can have a follow-up with outside. And what I did is start to build all those one-on-one relationships. And then when you're all in the room, all of a sudden they're all used to hearing you, but you don't have to do it in a way that's being the junior person in the room, because if you do that and that's the first time anybody's heard from you, sometimes it's like, but build those relationships on the side and get them used to you and hearing from you and clarifying, so that then it makes more sense to jump in.
I would also add, don't be afraid to ask them or that person, or you have those, for help, right? Help me understand this more, or I had this thought, help me understand if it's a good one, or if it aligns with the project, or, people really do want to help other people. And so if you kind of frame it in that context, you're showing them that you're really trying to seek information and work toward, something positive for the project. In the meantime, you're building a relationship, and organically you may find, your mentor. You may find that person who's gonna your questions are gonna resonate with them, and they're going to champion for you when you're not in the room. because that's important too. When you're in the room, it's great, but when you're not in the room, it's also good to have someone who's there being assertive for you.
Thank you, Gianna. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jess. This is really great so far. I have, again, sort of a work-specific question. I am sort of an entry-level role as well, and I've worked with a lot of attorneys who work with our organization, but they're not really part of our organization. I come across very frequently where it's like typically older men who are attorneys who come in and they try to, they do what you're doing, and they try to take over the interview and try to essentially like dominate whatever we're working on. And they're like not allowed to do that for the rules of our organization, but me and a few others that I work with at the level, they enforcing the rules of our agency against people from outside, especially when we're not attorneys. So just a little more
I have an idea for you. You can always show appreciation and gratitude. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm and your background and your knowledge, but let me remind you of the rules of engagement here. And you can repeatedly say that, like, thank you again for your enthusiasm and your knowledge. I'm learning so much. And I'm not saying this, to be disparaging or condescending, but it's acknowledging, and it's a repeated behavior that they're probably used to doing for decades, right? And their behavior might not change in one meeting, but at least you're asserting yourself on behalf of the rules and everybody else in the room, right? So if you can't stand up for yourself, maybe it's easier to stand up for the people next to you and everybody's time, and over time, it'll become easier.
I had to do this one in a meeting a couple years ago, but it was really impactful, and I'll get to the point, try to do that quickly. But it was kind of a mess of a meeting, and afterwards somebody pulled me aside. They said, "What were you trying to accomplish in that conversation?" And I just went into every meeting after that and tried to say, "Okay, the purpose of this meeting is X." Like, just start out the conversation that way of like, all right, so we're here today just for myself, gonna run down the purpose of this conversation is to get feedback from you, and then I take that and run with it, and whatnot, and just kind of say the rules out loud from the get-go, and just come at it from a way of like, just keep everybody on track. For myself, time is, the resource. We only have so much time here today. So just a reminder for myself, that come across like you're doing it for you to control the conversation, but just being respectful of your time. I want to keep everybody on track and remind us that this is how we're going to spend the next hour. And that way too, if you set that tone from the beginning and you're saying the rules with a witness, then when that person starts to run all over you, it's not because the other people in the room are aware, that it's not because you're not aware that it's happening.
Thank you for your question, Jess. Yes.
just really a thought, but maybe you can comment on it. I'm sitting here thinking about all these, different things that have happened, these different, approaches or conversations I've had. And I realize that it's always kind of like fun for me when there seems to be like aggression or a point where I can like combat, and that's always been very comfortable for me. But maybe there's always an inner personality we have that is like having a bigger boss inside of us, and then like when it comes up to discussions with other people, it's like, maybe I'm a little bit like this. So I'm wondering, maybe you can comment more really deny fingers, but is there a point where you could speak about kind of where those two can meet, and that the outer voice can be more of what the bigger boss we have inside of us, kind of like the more the bigger voice kind of comes out.
I think I go back to Monica's suggestion of practicing, right? Like, I think the way to get that voice to be more natural all the time is to use it, right? To make a muscle stronger, you've got to use it. And it is hard, right? There are, like I said, even though I pride myself on being, I don't want to say aggressive. I'm proud that I sometimes can be aggressive, because aggressive for me in marketing meant Like I was following up. When other people were dropping the ball, I was the one following up. But even having a personality like that, I still have to practice being certain ways and saying certain things in certain settings, right? Like I am still intimidated in certain meetings with certain people, but I don't let them see that. And I'll always still try to ask one small question, like use my voice. Like if I feel like I'm intimidated, I make myself. And that's really hard, but I make myself try to say something. Your mouth goes dry, your heart is beating, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And then it's less and less and less. And then you can sit up here and like just talk into a microphone and not care. My 8-year-old self is like, what is she doing right now?
And I couldn't agree more about the have someone explain something. I beat myself up about this comment, something really inappropriate example, and I should have said, I'm sorry, can you explain that? Because he would have stopped his tracks and been like, oh, I can't believe I just said that. And that's a tactic people use for bullying too. What do you mean by that?
Right. I just want to make a comment on the practice situation. You know, I think self-talk and running the roles in your head are very important. You know, you are your own best friend, so you can talk to yourself all the time and you can change your answers. And I think if you know that you're going to be in a situation or you've come from a situation, you can run it by yourself, basically, and have a conversation with yourself. I talk to myself all the time, you know, sometimes out loud if nobody's around. But, you know, I just think it's very important to be able to trust yourself and practice within yourself so that you can build your own confidence.
Well, that is our time for today. Perfect timing again, Robin. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. I hope and I think you've gotten something out of it. Thank you, Robin, Stephanie, and Sarah, for your wonderful insight. And I look forward to connecting with some of you after this.